Hey everyone, welcome to Stripe Developer Office Hours. We're coming from you from the exhibition floor here at Stripe Sessions. With me, I have some folks from the Stripe Data and Reporting team who are going to talk to us a little bit about some of their products that they're working on. So Arya, George, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we just start off with a quick round of introductions. Arya, you've been here before, so
Yes.
why don't you remind folks who you are and what do you do on the team?
Hi, everyone. My name is Arya. I'm a product manager on our data products, and I'm excited to talk about Stripe Data Pipeline.
Awesome. And George, what about you?
Hi, my name is George. I'm also a product manager on our data products team. I work on Stripe Sigma.
Awesome. So, a lot of folks don't know we even have these data products, which I think is, for me, these are some of the most underrated products we have in the whole Stripe catalog. And so, for me, I really love the ability for us to be able to go in and play around our data, export our data. But again, people don't really know what these are. So I think I kind of want to start off with talking about data pipeline.
Sure.
Could you tell me a little bit about what is this thing? What can we do with it? What are some of these use cases that it supports?
Yep. So data pipeline is basically a way to sync all of your Stripe data to your data warehouse or cloud storage destination.
Yeah.
It's basically a way to be able to centralize all of your data. Let's say you have all of your revenue data in Stripe, but you have your marketing data or your sales data in Salesforce, let's say. You're centralizing all of that data in one place, and we're basically meeting our users where they're actually doing those analytics.
Nice.
So let's say in Snowflake, for example. And what I think is really cool about this product is that means that your accounting and finance teams and your analytics teams and your data science teams are looking at that data in the same place, meaning that now becomes the source of truth in that one place.
So when you say meet our users where we are or where they are,
Yeah.
I'm guessing that means that we can export that Stripe data into, I guess, a different set of destinations,
Yep.
different file formats, and some of that type of stuff?
Yep, exactly. So they're in Parquet file formats today, and we support
Got it.
Snowflake and Redshift as our data warehouses, and then Google Cloud Storage, Azure Blob Storage, and Amazon S3 as our cloud storage destinations.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great capability because I know so many users that they have other ways of trying to get Stripe data
Yeah.
out, which, might not always be the best way.
Right.
I know folks that, they rely on syncing webhooks or
Yep.
making, looped calls around APIs, right?
Right.
And it sounds like using data pipeline is a little bit more of an efficient way to do it because now I can just have a bulk export of all my Stripe data and I can kind of reason about it in, like you said, my warehouse of choice, my
Yep.
my database of choice, my whatever data tool that
Right.
I'm using. I'll be able to export alongside some of the other information I have within my company, right?
Yep, exactly. We've seen merchants, for example, who they've sort of outgrown maybe the dashboard reports, so downloading a CSV file takes literally days.
Yeah.
We've also seen merchants who are using third-party ETLs where it's not the most secure way to be able to give your API keys to a third party rather than relying on Stripe to handle Stripe data.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So in addition to being able to export data,
Yeah.
do we have the ability to do things like scheduling and transformations and some of these types of things too?
Yeah, part of the reason why people use and rely on Stripe data, which is both of our products, is because of the Stripe model itself. And so these are a lot of
Yeah.
purpose-built data models that you're using rather than having to make these transformations yourself. And so let's say you do want to join, again, these data with some other data, you can do that in Snowflake, for example. The ability to schedule or sort of choose the data sets you want is on the roadmap and coming soon.
Because I can imagine Stripe data probably has a really rich data, architecture,
Yeah.
a really rich schema
Yeah.
with different, products and transactions and subscriptions and all this types of stuff.
Yep.
And so I think the ability to be able to filter those down might be interesting to folks. So it's interesting to
Yeah.
know, and it's exciting to know that the team is already thinking about this and thinking about how, we can enable that feature for our users.
Yep, you're right. But I do think that the value and really the unlock that you discover is when you get the full data set and then you start to see oh, I see how these kind of use cases are unlocked when I have access to these 200 tables. And George will show our schema later, and you can kind of see all of the different use cases that are unlocked when you're looking at the whole data as a whole.
Yeah, I can even imagine too. You probably want to always get the whole set
Yeah.
because you don't know how things are connected. You don't know
Yeah,
how things are,
exactly, yeah.
and you might end up missing data if you decide, oh, I don't want this set, or I want to filter out these dates or something
Right,
like that.
exactly. But we do know that sometimes just for ease of use or specific use cases, you might be interested in just the customers table, which is why we're still building it.
Yeah. What are some interesting use cases, other than reporting and stuff like
Yeah.
that you've seen some of your customers use as they either using Stripe Data Pipeline?
Yeah, we see a lot of users using it for like risk modeling. We have radar rules, for example, as a table, and in that table, you're able to see like why did a specific payment intent fail?
Yeah.
Was it a lost card that was used? And so then they're feeding all of that into maybe a model that they have existing already, and just feeding it more and more data to make it richer.
Yeah.
And so we use that. We see that kind of like risk and modeling use case a lot. And then I alluded to this earlier, but really kind of like closing the books and making that faster. Usually book closing at the end of a month can take, I think most companies, like 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
And we've seen companies go from 7 to 10 days to 3 days. And
Wow.
more and more, we actually just have fresher data coming out during sessions today. And so that's going to start to become like 1 or 2 days. So if you think about like a finance and accounting team, who normally 25% of their month is spent on book closing,
Right,
that's
right.
now a couple days.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So George, definitely don't want to leave you out. So Stripe Sigma, right?
Yes.
So completely different product, but I kind of feel like you guys kind of exist in a very similar space, right? So what's the difference between Sigma and what our team does with Stripe Data Pipeline?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, there's a lot of commonalities between Sigma and Stripe Data Pipeline in
Yeah.
that we share the same underlying data set. So
Okay.
whereas Stripe Data Pipeline lets you export that data into your own data warehouse and cloud storage, Stripe Sigma is Stripe's hosted data warehouse where you can run queries directly on top of your Stripe data from within the Stripe dashboard.
Got
So
it.
we give you the same ability to run SQL queries. We give you the same ability to schedule queries. We even give you an AI assistant that does natural language to SQL translation and then executes that for users who might not be as familiar with SQL.
Okay, so then across that schema, I can just execute just standard SQL queries, or is it a specific dialect of SQL that's supported inside of Sigma?
Yeah, so we use Trino SQL. So Trino is a dialect, and it is pretty standard, and it gives you access to the same tables, the same data sets that you would via Stripe Data Pipeline.
Sure. And is there like API access for working with these two, or is it purely just I'm going to write SQL inside of the editor, inside of the Stripe dashboard?
Yeah, so you can use run SQL queries directly inside of the editor that we provide on the Stripe dashboard. But we also just launched a new Sigma API so that you can run
Really?
SQL queries programmatically from inside of your application or inside of your own workflows outside of the Stripe dashboard.
Nice. I think why don't we take a look at the demo, because I'm kind of interested to see what this looks like.
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I want to show you one thing, which is the Stripe data schema. As we talked about, Stripe Data Pipeline and Stripe Sigma share the underlying tables and data sets. And for the first time, we give you an interactive ERD that allows you to view and see all the different data sets that we expose to you via Stripe Sigma and Stripe Data Pipeline. So for example, if you want to understand the balanced transactions table, we can show you all the different fields, all the different types, all the different columns that you can query via these two products, as well as all the different other types of data sets that they're connected to via foreign key relationships, so that you can join balanced transactions against transfers, for example, in this case. This is really helpful when you're trying to figure out how to design your SQL query or how to test your different SQL queries to give you the answers that you need.
Got it. So two questions. So this data schema, how closely does this relate to the API shapes that we have? So again, like when you look at the Stripe API reference documentation, again, we have accounts, we have customers, we have prices, and these types of things. Are those fields and properties pretty similar, or is there some type of transformation that has to happen between those two?
Yeah, for the most part, it's a one-to-one mapping between the Stripe API objects and entities and the data sets that you see in the schema here. A few differences would be that we have flattened some of the nested fields and attributes in the public API into their own columns that are typed in these tables for Stripe Sigma and Data Pipeline to make it easier and more ergonomic for querying. In addition to that, there are derived data sets that we offer in Stripe Sigma and Stripe Data Pipeline that are not available in the public API, which give users more flexibility and unlock new capabilities for running analytical queries.
Right. Okay, and so one more question before I let you go on. So how fresh is this data? Like, is there, like if my application is constantly moving, right?
Yeah.
Like how fresh is the data that, I don't know, I can query on versus the data I can export between your two products?
Yeah, so for all the API-backed data sets, like ones we were talking about, that have a corresponding endpoint in the public API. Stripe Sigma is up to 3 hours fresh, and Stripe Data Pipeline is about 6 hours fresh.
Okay.
There are the derived data sets, which really vary on a case-by-case basis, but they tend to take a little bit longer.
Got it. Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and get back to the demo.
Okay, awesome. So as we talked about, the new thing that we launched was the Sigma API. And so there is a new tab under Custom Reports here on the left in the docs where you can see and read about the Sigma API. There's also a link to the API documentation. For the demo, I want to walk through this quick start where we will just run a query from the Sigma API through the command line. So first of all, the thing that you need to do is create an API key in the dashboard. For the purposes of this demo, I've already done that. And this first command essentially uses this new query runs endpoint to run a very basic select star from the balance transactions table that we were looking at earlier. So what I'm going to do is just copy this. I'm going to open up my VS Code and just run this query. And as you can see in the response, I get back a few things. I get back a query ID. I also get a handle to the file. And you can see the status was it succeeded.
Right.
Sometimes for long-running queries, you might get a response where the status is still running. So you might want to pull to see when the results are actually ready.
Yeah.
One way to pull for the results is by actually just checking to see the status. Now, you want to grab the query ID and replace it here. And this is the way that you can check to see that whether the query has succeeded. This query was pretty simple, so it has already finished running.
Yeah.
This means that we can now just query for the results.
Gotcha.
Now you'll see that we have this file ID that we will grab, and we will now use that file ID to download the results.
Okay.
So this is the curl. Now we will replace the file handle with the one from our call, and then let's just save this as results.csv. So what this will do is it will download the file associated with the query that we just ran. And you can see that, okay, it downloaded this to our desktop. Now, I have this folder open. As you can see, results.csv should contain the results of that query that we just ran. And if you take a look, indeed, there are about 10 rows from the balance transactions table.
So I have so many questions for what you just showed me that now. So one, that's kind of interesting to see that we can actually run these queries programmatically via the API. You did mention, having to poll to wait and see when the results are ready or not. Are there webhook events that are available for that folks can listen to, or are we just polling for now?
Yeah, there are webhook events. So there is a webhook that you can subscribe to for when the query succeeds. And so if you listen to that webhook, you don't have to continuously pull for the query. Right. Again, it depends on how you've set up your integration. Sometimes you just actually want to pull for short running queries. For long running queries, you might want to listen to the webhook. So it really depends on your integration use case.
Gotcha. And then the file format for the result was a CSV file. Do you support any other file formats, or are all the file formats, or all the responses all in CSV?
Currently, the file format is CSV. We are working on adding support for JSON and other types of file formats in the future. And if you have other types of file formats that, in particular, that you want to see supported, please definitely reach out to us and get in touch with our team. We'd love to get it prioritized on the roadmap.
Cool. And so another thing that kind of caught my attention was, as a developer, I saw you putting SQL in an API call, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Is there a way for me to create a query prepared ahead of time, and then say, hey, I want you to run this query, and give me the, instead of me actually putting it in the request? Is that possible?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up, Sissel, because
perfect.
We actually have an endpoint for creating saved queries. So the same way that in the Sigma UI, you can create a saved SQL query,
Uh-huh.
you can also do that programmatically by
That's awesome.
exactly running a post. So the same query that we wanted to run against balanced transactions or any other query that you might want, you can save that as a save query. And then from there, in the future, you don't have to, take a complex SQL query, stick it in the curl. You can just have an identifier to the query ID and just run that programmatically.
Okay, that's perfect. So then I could just obviously run it on whatever schedule I want, run it as many times as I want, and I'll just get different run instances.
Exactly.
Right, and I can query them as I see fit.
Exactly.
Okay. And then when I get my results back, I'm never getting the results back in the API call, right? But I'm getting the results back as in terms of like, okay, here's the ID for the run, and I can either download the file, but I'm guessing I can actually go into the dashboard and see those results as well. Is that possible or no?
Right now, it's not possible.
Okay.
So what you do is you get a handle to what is the files API, and
Sure.
then you can download it. But in the future, yes, we will think about ways to support kind of cross-compatibility between the dashboard and the
Right.
API.
And like you mentioned before, like this is private preview, right? So this is fresh, this is brand new, and so I know I'm asking you a lot of questions, but it sounds like the team is already thinking about adding a lot of these features as we go on.
Yeah, for sure. This is private preview, so it's fresh off the press. But between now and when we plan to GA, we will be adding in more features, refining, taking user feedback, and trying to add more features to support some of the things that you just brought up.
Cool. All right, so now this is the Sigma API, right? So what does Sigma in the dashboard actually look like? Because I'm guessing there's a dashboard, like a Stripe dashboard experience I can go in and write queries right there in the...
Exactly. And so for Sigma users who are probably familiar with this, Sigma UI in the dashboard gives you a SQL editor that allows you to run queries on top of the same kind of schema that we just talked about, as well as a number of templates that we give you out of the box. The Sigma UI also allows you to do things like scheduling. In addition to that, there is also a Sigma Assistant, which is the AI text-to-SQL generation tool that I mentioned earlier. That so in the case where you don't know exactly what query to run, it'll generate the first draft of that query for you.
Yeah, I love that because for someone that, let's say, this is my first time kind of exploring that data schema, and I know what I want, but I'm not sure what path to go down exploring it.
Yeah.
Sounds like I could just ask the AI, right? It could kind of help me figure it out.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And so in this space, I'm guessing we also have things like syntax highlighting and like some autocompletes and things of that nature to kind of like help developers along, or?
There are some basic autocompletes, but
Sure.
we don't have the full-fledged syntax highlighting and autocompletes that you would get in like a VS Code or your kind of your standard editor. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to build a Sigma API.
Sure.
So that users can construct their queries and manage their queries from outside of the Stripe dashboard. We know that our goal is not to build the best-in-class SQL editor
sure.
interface or autocomplete interface. We want to meet users where they are, and a lot of our users are already using VS Code or JetBrains and other editors and IDEs that already have a lot of these features built in.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me down the pathway of thinking about how do I use both of your products together, right? Because it sounds like Sigma is a great way for me to kind of like explore my Stripe data in a silo, like by itself, and kind of just see, well, what's happening in my Stripe account? What are my customers doing? What are my transactions and taxes and like all that types of stuff in that space. But when I'm ready to do a little bit deeper, exploration inside of what's actually happening in my company, I could use data pipeline now. And I'm guessing we could, use some of the similar queries, but in my data warehouse or in a different place because, the data model is the same, right? The structure is the same, but now I'm just kind of looking at it somewhere else, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe Aria, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. They're very complementary products because
Sure.
the data schema is the same. We see a lot of our users where maybe some teams are using Sigma. It's a little bit more intuitive for them. Maybe they're already in dashboard.
Yeah.
But maybe the engineering teams prefer to use Snowflake. And so they're looking at the same data just in a different surface.
Sure.
And maybe they have different use cases like wanting to centralize that data with other areas. But they're meant to be very complementary and really work together.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, I'm a big fan of being able to like explore data and understand what's happening. And I think this AI assistant sounds like amazing to me. I haven't played around with it yet, but I definitely want to make some time to try that out. So for folks that are watching, like, what do you think like, where do you think they should start? Like, what should their what should their origin story in exploring Stripe data be? Like, should we come in here and kind of play around with things? You know, like, where do you think they should start?
Yeah, I would say take a look at the Stripe data schema, because that gives you a really good sense of here's all the data sets that we are offering. Here are the use cases. You can start to understand whether the data you're looking for is available. And then for Stripe Sigma, which is built into the dashboard, we have a 30-day free trial. So anybody just, if you're already a Stripe customer, you can just start querying your data right away and experimenting. And then from there, Stripe Data Pipeline also has the same free trial. And so if you have a data warehouse set up already, you can very easily pipe that data into your data warehouse and start exploring and integrating that with your own first-party data.
Got it.
And both of these products are also available in the sandbox environment. So you can also, maybe you want to start the free trial, but you can also play around with test data in your sandbox environment and kind of just like create test transactions, see what the data looks like there. Because especially for production transactions, maybe you don't necessarily want to export that data yet or play around with that data yet.
For sure. Are there any limitations with using either of your products in a sandbox? Like, I don't know, limitations in terms of like size of exports or the types of queries that we can run?
We have a couple limitations, which is like scheduled queries. Right now, do not work for, are not supported in Stripe Sigma.
And I think that makes sense. Yeah.
But that is something that, in terms of where we're building, we will look to get to parity, one-to-one parity between the sandbox and the production environments.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah, nothing for SDB.
Yeah.
Will look and feel the same.
All right, great. So, what do you think folks should do now? Like, I know your product is in private preview. Well, at least the API is in private preview.
Yeah.
How do we sign up? How do we get involved? How do folks start engaging with you and your team and start working with some of your products?
Yeah, if you are not using Stripe Sigma already, sign up for the free trial. And if you are a Sigma user already, sign up for the private preview for the Sigma API at the bottom of the docs. And then our team will get in touch and get you access to the tool so you can start running curls.
Awesome. And same with you, I guess?
Same. There's a 30-day free trial. I think like one of the easiest ways is also just kind of start to play around in dashboard, look at the charts that you're interested in. What are you kind of most interested in customizing or drilling into, or what would you like to see that? And then that can kind of take you on the journey. And the ERD that we just launched that's in docs is also another way to just start looking at what's the data available, what can I do with this data, and you'll start to click into things.
Nice. Well, thank you both for coming on, man. This has been great. And thank you all for watching. Again, this has been Stripe Developer Office Hours coming for you here on the exhibition floor of Stripe Sessions. We're going to have more videos and more interviews coming up, so stay tuned and we'll see you soon.